February 3, 2026, the Sepang International Circuit, Malaysia. Pre-season testing has just ended, and Yamaha has achieved something remarkable. Their new V4 engine has posted competitive lap times, proving the Japanese manufacturer can still build a winning machine. But as engineers celebrate in the pit lane and photographers capture the moment, the man who made it all possible is being betrayed. This is not just a story about switching engines. It is a story about calculated corporate deception. Who was the brilliant Japanese engineer whose V4 designs were buried for 30 years while an outsider took the credit? What ruthless regulation change, designed in secret, forced Yamaha to abandon their championship-winning philosophy? And why is Fabio Quartararo, the fastest rider of his generation, being forced to gamble his entire career on a machine that may arrive too late? The truth is more shocking than the paddock admits. This is the untold story of pride, survival, and a ticking clock at the heart of MotoGP's most desperate gamble. The year was 2004, and Valentino Rossi was about to change everything. The Italian maestro, already a four-time world champion with Honda, shocked the racing world by signing with Yamaha. Honda had the fastest bike. Honda had the best engineers. Honda had won the last 3 championships. But Rossi walked away. He wanted something Honda could not give him. A bike that danced. Yamaha gave him the YZR-M1, an inline-four motorcycle. 4 cylinders arranged in a straight line across the frame. It was not the fastest bike in a straight line. It did not have the most horsepower. But it had something else. Magic in the corners. The inline-four engine's long, heavy crankshaft acted like a gyroscope, resisting sudden changes in direction. Once you leaned the M1 into a turn, it locked onto the racing line with supernatural precision. Corner speed became Yamaha's weapon. While rivals had to brake hard, turn, then accelerate out, the M1 simply flowed through corners like water. Rossi won the championship in his first year with Yamaha. Then again in 2005, then 2008 and 2009. 4 titles in 6 seasons. Jorge Lorenzo added 3 more championships in 2010, 2012, and 2015. 7 world titles in 12 years. The inline-four was not just competitive, it was dominant. Engineers at Yamaha headquarters in Iwata believed they had discovered the secret formula. Raw power was overrated. Elegance through corners was everything. And they were right. For a while. But across the paddock, in the red garages of Ducati, a different philosophy was taking shape. And it was about to destroy everything Yamaha believed. Ducati had always been different. Mavericks, rebels. Where Yamaha built smooth, predictable motorcycles, Ducati built angry, aggressive beasts. Their weapon of choice was the V4 engine, 2 banks of cylinders arranged in a V shape, creating a shorter, more compact power plant. Shorter crankshaft meant less friction, fewer bearings to rob power, more horsepower at high revolutions. The V4 made more power than an inline-four, period. But for years, that power came with a terrible price. V4 bikes were twitchy, unpredictable, vicious in the corners. Casey Stoner, the Australian genius who won Ducati's only championship in 2007, could ride the V4 on the edge of disaster. But when he left for Honda in 2011, Ducati spent years struggling. Valentino Rossi himself joined Ducati in 2011, hoping to tame the Red Beast. He failed. 2 miserable seasons without a single victory. The V4 was fast, but it was poison. Then everything changed. Around 2016, MotoGP teams discovered aerodynamics. Engineers began bolting wings to motorcycles. Massive carbon fiber appendages that generated downforce, pushing the front tire into the track. Suddenly, corner speed mattered less because every bike could carry more speed everywhere. The advantage shifted to motorcycles that could accelerate hardest and reach the highest top speeds, and the V4 excelled at both. Ducati's chief engineer, Jorge Dall'Igna, a quiet, methodical genius, saw the future first. He turned the unrideable V4 into a weapon of absolute domination. By 2022, Ducati had cracked the code. They won the championship. In 2023, they won 17 out of 20 races. In 2024, they won 19 out of 20 races. 19. On 14 occasions that season, all 3 podium positions went to Ducati riders. It was not racing anymore. It was a parade. Red bikes at the front. Everyone else fighting for scraps. But the humiliation went deeper. KTM, running a V4, grabbed podiums. Aprilia, running a V4, grabbed podiums. Honda, despite drowning in their own disasters, at least had a V4 to build on. And Yamaha? Yamaha's last race victory came in July 2022 at the German Grand Prix. Since then, nothing. A drought stretching to 44 races without standing on the top step. While Ducati celebrated, Yamaha mechanics stood in their garage, watching the red tide roll past, powerless to stop it. The statistics were brutal. V4-powered bikes won 44 of the last 50 races. They topped speed charts in 47 of those 50 races. The inline-four was not just losing, it was being erased from history. When Suzuki pulled out of MotoGP at the end of 2022, Yamaha became the last manufacturer still running an inline-four engine, completely alone. Every rival had chosen the V4 path. Ducati, Honda, KTM, Aprilia, all V4, all faster. Yamaha stood isolated, clinging to a philosophy the world had abandoned. Inside Yamaha's factory team, one man felt the weight of this isolation more than anyone: Fabio Quartararo, the young Frenchman with movie star looks and blinding speed. He had joined Yamaha in 2019 as a satellite rider, full of hope. In 2021, he delivered the impossible. He won the World Championship on a bike that was already falling behind. But Quartararo had not won because the M1 was the best bike. He won because he rode better than everyone else. After that championship, the decline accelerated. 2022 was difficult. 2023 was painful. 2024 was torture. At every race, the same nightmare. Quartararo would qualify brilliantly, often claiming pole position. Then the lights went out and reality hit. Ducati riders would simply drive around him on the straights. 5 kilometers per hour faster. 10 kilometers per hour faster. Sometimes more. Fighting a V4 in a straight line was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. In press conferences, Quartararo stopped hiding his frustration. More power. I need more power. We are losing too much on the straights. I cannot defend my position when riders just accelerate past me. I can be perfect in qualifying, perfect in the corners, and still finish 5th because I lose half a second every lap on acceleration. His voice grew harder with each race. This cannot continue. Something must change. Behind closed doors, the champion delivered an ultimatum: build me a winning bike or I walk. His contract runs through 2026, but he made his position clear. That season would be Yamaha's final chance. If the 2026 bike could not win races, he would leave. And without Fabio Quartararo, Yamaha would lose more than a fast rider. They would lose credibility. They would lose sponsors. They would lose their last connection to relevance. The clock was ticking, and Yamaha finally realized they were out of time. In early 2022, Yamaha made a move that shocked the racing world. They hired Luca Marmarini, not as a rider, not as a team manager, as a consultant for engine development. And Luca Marmarini was not just any engineer. He was Ferrari royalty, the man who had designed Formula One engines during Ferrari's golden age in the early 2000s. This was revolutionary for Yamaha. The Japanese manufacturer had always been insular, relying exclusively on Japanese engineers working in Japanese facilities. Bringing in a European, especially one from the brutal world of Formula One, signaled something profound. Yamaha was desperate. Lynn Jarvis, the veteran British team boss, did not hide the truth. When journalists asked what brief they gave Marmarini, Jarvis laughed bitterly and said, "Power, please, just give us power." But Marmarini was not just hired to tune the existing inline-four. He was brought in to answer a darker question. Could the inline-four be saved? Or was it already dead? For months, Marmarini studied Yamaha's engine. He ran simulations. He analyzed data. He compared it to every rival engine on the grid. His conclusion was brutal. The inline-four is a dead end. No matter how much money you spend, no matter how many engineers you hire, you cannot make it competitive against a V4. The physics are against you. The inline-four engine was wider than a V4, forcing engineers to mount it higher in the chassis. That raised the center of gravity, hurting handling. It also limited aerodynamic bodywork around the engine. Every advantage the V4 offered, the inline-four fought against. Weight distribution, aero efficiency, power delivery. The V4 was simply superior. Marmarini told Yamaha what they did not want to hear. If you want to compete again, you must build a V4. There is no other way. But building a V4 meant more than designing a new engine. It meant abandoning Yamaha's identity. The inline-four was not just an engine. It was the soul of Yamaha racing. Their production motorcycles, the legendary R1 Superbike, used inline-four engines. Switching to a V4 in racing would be admitting the inline-four could not win. It would be betraying the philosophy that had won 7 world championships. And for a proud Japanese company, that admission was almost impossible. But in the shadows, another force was pushing Yamaha toward the V4. A force they could not resist. The rulebook, MotoGP, was about to undergo massive regulation changes. In 2027, everything would reset. Engine displacement would drop from 1,000 cubic centimeters to 850 cubic centimeters. Aerodynamics would be heavily restricted, and most importantly, bikes would be policed using a standardized dimensional box. Every motorcycle would have to fit inside this box. If it did not fit, it was illegal, but the box was not neutral. The dimensions had been carefully chosen, and those dimensions favored one engine layout, the V4. An inline-four engine is significantly wider than a V4. Under the new box regulations, an inline-four bike would have very little room left for aerodynamic bodywork. The wings and fairings that generate downforce would have to be tiny, crippling performance. A V4, being narrower and more compact, would leave plenty of room for aero. The rules did not explicitly ban inline-four engines, but they made them nearly impossible to race competitively. It was a soft ban. Brilliant in its cruelty. Force all manufacturers toward V4 engines without actually saying so. Give them the illusion of choice while making only one choice viable. Yamaha could see the trap closing. Even if they wanted to keep fighting with the inline-four, the 2027 rules would kill it. The V4 was not just about performance anymore. It was about survival. Inside Yamaha's headquarters in Iwata, a tense meeting took place in March 2023. Engineers and executives gathered to decide the company's future. Some argued for one last push with the inline-four. Others demanded immediate action. The debate grew heated. Voices were raised, but in the end, the numbers did not lie. Ducati was untouchable. The 2027 regulations were coming. Fabio Quartararo was running out of patience. There was only one choice: Lynn Jarvis, normally diplomatic, spoke bluntly to the press afterward. When Suzuki was here, there were two manufacturers running with the inline-four and the others running with the V, but Suzuki stepped out, so we have been the only manufacturer remaining with the inline-four. And the inline-four, in our opinion, still has plenty of capacity to be developed. However, when our competitors are all with the V4 and we look towards the 2027 regulations, it is important for us to fully understand the potential of a V4 versus an inline-four. That final sentence was everything. Fully understand the potential. Diplomatic language for a terrible truth. We are building a V4 because we have no choice. The decision was made. Yamaha would design, build, and race a V4 engine. But the timeline was insane. They needed the bike ready for racing in 2026. That gave them less than 3 years to create something Ducati had spent 20 years perfecting. It was not ambitious. It was suicide. But what nobody outside Yamaha knew was the deeper betrayal hidden in this decision. A story that echoed another betrayal from another era. The story of the man whose genius had been stolen before. Before Yamaha's Phi-4 project began, before Luca Marmarini arrived, there was another engineer whose name should be remembered. A man who built something revolutionary and watched it be taken from him. His name was Masao Furusawa, and his story is the story within the story. In the late 1990s, Furusawa was Yamaha's chief engine designer, a quiet, methodical genius who rarely spoke to the press but commanded absolute respect in the paddock. He had designed the inline-four that Valentino Rossi would ride to glory. But before that, in the two-stroke era of the 1980s and early 1990s, Furusawa had built V4 engines, screaming, furious two-stroke V4s that won world championships with Eddie Lawson and Wayne Rainey. Furusawa understood the V4 better than almost anyone. He knew its strengths and its dangers. When Yamaha switched to four-stroke engines in 2002 under new regulations, Furusawa argued for a V4 layout. He had the designs ready. He had the experience. But Yamaha's executives overruled him. They wanted the inline-four. It was smoother, more reliable, and it fit their production bike philosophy. Furusawa's V4 designs were shelved, buried in filing cabinets, forgotten. Furusawa retired in 2016, his V4 dreams unrealized. And now, in 2024, Yamaha was building a V4 again, but Furusawa's designs were not being used. His knowledge was not being consulted. Instead, Yamaha turned to Marmarini, an outsider, because they no longer trusted their own history. The man who had won them championships was erased. His V4 legacy deleted. Just like Eric Broadley's Lola designs had been absorbed by Ford and his name erased from the GT40 story, Furusawa's V4 expertise was discarded by the company he had served for decades. This is what corporations do. They take genius and repackage it. They take credit and erase contributors. Yamaha's new V4 would carry no trace of Furusawa's work. It would be Marmarini's V4, the outsider's V4. And somewhere, in retirement, Furusawa watched and said nothing. Because that is what engineers do. They build. They watch their work be stolen. And they stay silent. But the V4 project faced a more immediate problem. It had to work. And building a MotoGP engine from scratch is not like assembling furniture. It is like building a fighter jet in your garage. Every millimeter matters. Every calculation must be perfect. One mistake, and the engine explodes, hurling metal shrapnel through the chassis at supersonic speed. And Yamaha had less than 3 years to get it right. By late 2023, Yamaha's V4 project was headquartered in a workshop in Italy, near the race circuits where testing could happen quickly. Luca Marmarini led a team of engineers from multiple countries: Japanese precision, Italian passion, British pragmatism. They worked brutal hours, fueled by espresso and desperation. The V4 engine began to take shape. Computer simulations showed promise. Dyno tests showed power. But numbers on a screen meant nothing. The engine had to run on a real motorcycle, at a real racetrack, under race conditions. In the paddock, rumors swirled. Yamaha is building something secret. Yamaha has a V4 coming, but nobody knew when it would appear. Then, in September 2024, Yamaha made their move. They entered Augusto Fernandez, their Spanish test rider, as a wild card at the San Marino Grand Prix in Misano. He would race the V4 against the full MotoGP field. Not to win, that was impossible, but to learn, to gather data, to begin the long, painful process of making the engine competitive. Friday morning, Fernandez rolled out of the garage on the V4. Mechanics in rival teams stopped and listened. The sound was different. Not the smooth, linear howl of the inline-four M1. This was sharper, more aggressive, a snarl instead of a song. The V4 had arrived. Fernandez accelerated down the straight and immediately reported problems. The bike lacked rear grip. It wanted to wheelie excessively under hard acceleration. The power delivery was too abrupt, like flipping a light switch instead of turning a dial. Classic V4 teething problems that Ducati and Honda had solved years ago. But there was something promising. The V4 was faster on straights than the inline-four M1. Not as fast as Ducati yet, but significantly better than before. In qualifying, Fernandez hit a top speed nearly 8 km per hour faster than the inline-four Yamahas. For a bike that had never raced before, that was encouraging. The engine made power. Real power. Now they just needed to make it rideable. The mechanics gave the V4 a nickname in those early days. They called it the Hammer. Not because it was elegant or refined, but because it hit hard. Brutal power. No subtlety. Just force. One Italian mechanic, speaking off the record, described it perfectly. The inline-four was like a violin. Beautiful, precise, but quiet. The V4 is like a sledgehammer. It does not care about beauty, it just wants to destroy things. And in MotoGP, sometimes you need a sledgehammer. But nicknames and potential meant nothing to the man who mattered most. Fabio Quartararo tested the V4 during practice sessions at Misano. His feedback was measured, diplomatic, and terrifying. The bike has potential, but it is not ready. It needs a lot of work. Translation: We are in trouble. As 2024 ended and 2025 began, pressure inside Yamaha reached breaking point. Fabio Quartararo's frustration boiled over in interviews. He stopped being polite. 2026 is Yamaha's last chance. Behind the scenes, every rival manufacturer contacted Quartararo's management. Ducati wanted him. Aprilia wanted him. He could name his price, but Quartararo wanted to give Yamaha one final chance. February 2026, the preseason test at Sepang. That was the deadline. Now, at Sepang, the moment of truth arrived. 3 days of testing complete. The data was in, and the results were shocking. Not because the V4 had failed, but because it had succeeded. Barely, but enough. Quartararo posted lap times within 0.3 of a second of the fastest Ducati. 0.3. For the first time in 2 years, Quartararo did not look defeated. He looked dangerous. Across the paddock, in Ducati's garage, Gigi Dall'Igna watched with cold eyes. He knew what they had built. He knew how close they were, and he knew how far they still had to go. While all these was going on, Masao Furusawa sat at his desk in his office. He had watched the Sepang test on television. He had seen the V4 he had designed 30 years ago, reborn under another man's name. He had watched Marmarini receive the credit. He had watched his legacy be erased, and he had said nothing. And now you know. The shocking truth behind Yamaha's switch to a V4 MotoGP engine. Not just a technical decision, but a betrayal 30 years in the making. Was Yamaha's greatest battle on the track or behind closed doors? Let's hear what you think in the comments section. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.